Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 4th of December. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. It's great that you could join us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. South Korea's chief nuclear envoy says the long-stalled multilateral talks on North Korea's denuclearization can resume if North Korea is willing to hold constructive dialogue. Reports say Sony Pictures will officially name North Korea as the source of a hacking attack that crippled its computer systems last week. The announcement could come as early as this Thursday. Plus, a grand jury in New York decides not to charge a white police officer over the death of a black man put in a chokehold by the officer. President Obama said the ruling speaks to larger issues U.S. minorities have with law enforcement. But our top story this morning, the possible resumption of the long-stalled six-party talks has taken one step closer toward becoming reality after South Korea expressed its willingness to come back to the table if North Korea first meets a couple of conditions. Wrapping up talks with Russia's deputy foreign minister in Moscow on Wednesday, Seoul's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk said talks can resume if Pyongyang shows some sincerity and seriously intends to hold constructive dialogue on its denuclearization. Otherwise, they would be meaningless. The six-party talks involving the two Koreas, the US, China, Japan and Russia, haven't been held since late 2008. Hwang added that while relations between North Korea and Russia have improved in recent weeks following the visit of a top North Korean official, Moscow still strongly opposes North Korea's nuclear weapons development. He added that it's possible North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin could meet, but he said he wasn't aware of any time frame. Now, a widely read tech blog is reporting that Sony Pictures will name North Korea as the source of the hacking attack that knocked out the company's computer systems for over a week. Citing two sources close to this probe, Recode says the announcement could come as soon as today. The exact details of what Sony will say are still being finalized according to this blog, but the sources say the finger will be pointed at North Korea. Sony has yet to make any public statement, though, we must add. The massive cyber attack shut down computers at the company and leaked DVD screeners of 5 unreleased Sony Pictures movies onto the internet, where they could be illegally downloaded. North Korea has sought to stop Sony from releasing a film, which you can see now, a film called The Interview that depicts 2 American journalists sent to kill North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And staying with a related story to that, and experts in the United States say North Korea has some of the best hacking capabilities in the entire world. They suggest that, considering the threat posed by Pyongyang's elite band of hackers, a mutual defense treaty between South Korea and the US should include measures against cyber warfare. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Good afternoon, ladies.
Speaking at a cyber defense meeting in Washington, specialist in Northeast Asian affairs at Johns Hopkins University, Alexander Manzarov pointed out that North Korea has continuously enhanced its cyber hacking capabilities over the past decade. He emphasized that Pyongyang is now capable of penetrating both Seoul and Washington's internet networks, with an army of hackers totaling in the thousands.
Now, 10 years later, the South Koreans believe it's almost 6,000, but probably it's twice as much.
In order to better deal with Pyongyang's cyber threats, some experts believe defense measures should be included in the Korea-US Mutual Defense Treaty, similar to a NATO agreement that calls for collective defense against cyber attacks.
The NATO member states agreed to that a large-scale cyber attack against a member country could be considered an attack on the entire alliance.
North Korea has also been suspected of taking part in Iran's recent hacking of 50 government and private firms across 16 nations, as Korea was the second most targeted country behind U.S.
Knowing what level of access they have into over 50 different companies around the world tells us what they could do if they wanted to in terms of controlling critical infrastructure, our physical world, transportation, you name it. So
experts say Seoul will need to invest more and upgrade its cyber defense system to the level of Israel's cyber Iron Dome if it wants to become less vulnerable to North Korea's virtual online war. 김현빈, ARIRANG News.
A memorial marking the sacrifices made by British troops during the Korean War has been unveiled in central London. More than 300 British veterans attended the unveiling of the memorial, which was paid for by the South Korean government, Korean companies and Koreans living in the UK. Coming more than 60 years after the end of the war, London is the last capital city among the Allies in the Korean War to have such a monument. Britain sent 81,000 troops to Korea during the war. More than 1,100 British soldiers died in the conflict. To mark the day, Queen Elizabeth II sent a congratulatory speech that was read on her behalf by the Duke of Gloucester. Let's take a look.
The memorial is a fitting tribute to the veterans of that fierce conflict and will ensure that they and their fallen comrades are never forgotten.
The British veterans have been pushing for the establishment of a memorial like this since 2011, and they expressed hope the sacrifices of their brothers would never be forgotten. Now, just a little over a week since the Ferguson decision enraged the African-American community in the US, another grand jury, this time in New York, has decided not to indict a white police officer who killed an unarmed black man in a chokehold. For more on this, we're joined by Eunice Kim. So, Eunice, this decision in New York came out a few hours ago now, and we are already seeing protests pop up in the city. How are the authorities reacting to this?
We're seeing a lot of sadness, Mark. President Barack Obama saying the decision will spark a strong reaction from the public. And New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, whose wife is African-American, called it a very painful day for the city, adding that anyone who believes in justice should feel a call to action right now. Here's what else he said.
If you really want to dignify the life of Eric Garner, you will do so through peaceful protest. You will work relentlessly for change. You will not sully his name with violence or vandalism. That doesn't bring us closer to a better community. The only thing that's ever worked is peaceful protest, non-violent social activism. It's the only thing that has ever worked.
Even as the mayor was speaking, protesters gathered in Times Square and Union Square calling for justice and change. The death of 43-year-old Eric Garner was pronounced a homicide back on July 17th. He died at a hospital hours after police officers in Staten Island had tackled him and put him in a chokehold, a technique that is banned under NYPD's patrol manual. Now, it was all caught on video that had spread via the web. As the grand jury was reviewing the case since August, the officer in question, Daniel Pantaleo, also testified before the jury last month. Mayor Blasio said he spoke with Attorney General Eric Holder on the phone, who promised that the federal investigation into the death of the father to six would be thorough, expeditious, and independent.
Well, we'll keep an eye on the reaction to that jury decision throughout the day, of course. Now, moving over to Europe and Sweden in particular. The Prime Minister there has called for snap elections, and this might not be unusual in some countries, but in Sweden it's the first time it's happened in more than 50 years.
That's right, Mark. The move comes after Stefan Löfven's administration's first budget was rejected by Parliament, and Sweden's king has expressed his hope that good would come out of these fresh elections. Prime Minister Löfven said in a news conference on Wednesday that Sweden was now in a, quote, serious and difficult situation, and as such, the government will hold snap elections on March 22nd of next year to give voters a choice in the new political landscape. Now, the current administration's coalition of Social Democrats and Greens is viewed as the weakest government in decades after the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats were handed power in the September elections. Now, the Sweden Democrats have threatened to make the country ungovernable unless it adopts tough immigration policies, including cutting 90% of people seeking asylum in the country, policies held by neighboring countries like Denmark. Now, immigration is emerging as a hot topic in many countries around the world, and that would be one.
Yeah, it certainly is a very hot topic, especially in Europe and in Sweden, where a lot of people are unhappy with what they see as mass immigration into the country. Well, thank you very much, Eunice, and we'll see you again at noon.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. 11 bodies were recovered on Wednesday from the Korean-operated fishing boat that sank off Russia's eastern coast earlier this week. Of the bodies pulled out of the icy waters on Wednesday, Korea's foreign ministry says 3 were Korean, 7 Indonesian and 1 Filipino. That pushes the official death toll in this awful disaster up to 12. 41 other members of the crew of that boat remain unaccounted for at the moment. The families of the Korean fishermen have called on Sajo Industries, this is the company that owns that boat, to salvage the sunken vessel, as they believe most of the missing crew are trapped inside it. The company has yet to respond to that request. Earlier this week, Korea's National Assembly passed the government budget by the deadline set by the Constitution for the first time in 12 years. But some lawmakers say a new parliamentary act that sets a very strict deadline led to a serious lack of oversight. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
Back in 2012, lawmakers passed the revised National Assembly Act to prevent delays in the passage of budget bills, which were often railroaded at the year's end. The new law made it mandatory for all parliamentary committees to finish their budget reviews by November 30th every year. If they fail to do that, bills are tossed to the parliamentary floor leaders to come to a compromise. The new law was put into action this year, with the 2 main rival parties making strenuous efforts to meet the legal deadline.
We work day and night to review the bills without ever adjourning a meeting.
At Tuesday's plenary vote, the atmosphere was certainly different. No shouting and no fighting, with lawmakers discussing each bill before it was put to a vote. And although the deadline for passing the budget bill was met for the first time in more than a decade, opposition lawmakers raised issue with the law. They say not enough time was given to thoroughly review both the budget bill and its auxiliary bills. Normally, those bills that are attached to the budget are looked over and approved first by a parliamentary committee. But since there was no agreement in place by the November 30th deadline, the floor leaders took charge and had just 2 days to review them before it was put to a plenary vote. Lawmakers say the parliament usually has the legislative authority to assess the bills that the government proposes. But because of the newly enacted law, the National Assembly merely passed the bills that were drafted by the government to meet the legal deadline. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, the falling price of crude may be music to the ears of drivers, but the trend is giving the Korean construction industry a collective headache. Industry officials say slumping prices means lower orders for petrochemical plants from cash-rich Middle Eastern countries. Our Hwang Jie reports.
Korean construction companies are not likely to achieve the $70 billion goal set by the government for them to win orders abroad this year. That's largely due to tumbling oil prices, which prompted Middle East oil producers to delay their petrochemical and infrastructure projects. With less than 1 month to go, Korean companies have won less than $60 billion worth of orders so far this year. Government officials say with too many variables in the market, local companies could run into problems in winning major deals for the remainder of the year. The suspension this year of a water management project in Thailand also makes it difficult for the country to meet the goal. The project involves Seoul's state-run Korea Water Resources Corporation. Industry officials say Korean companies will face an even more difficult year in 2015. That's because there's no sign that global oil prices, which have lost 40% from their peak in June, will rebound anytime soon. They say Korean companies are relying too heavily on the Middle East for their overseas construction contracts, although they're trying to diversify their markets. The Korean government is also making efforts to help them find markets elsewhere. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Last-minute touches are being put to a plant in Korea's southern port city of Busan that, in less than a month, will provide almost 50,000 tons of drinking water for the city every single day. For more on the nation's first desalination plant that will quench the city's thirst with previously undrinkable water, here's our Connie Lee.
It's this seawater surrounding Korea's southern coast that's being turned into fresh, drinkable water. Korea now has its very first desalination plant built and ready to go for full operation starting in January. Located in the southern port city of Busan, the $175 million plant can pump in about 100,000 tons of water per day from the ocean and remove the salt and turn it into 45,000 tons of fresh water, enough for about 150,000 residents in the city. This high-tech facility was built by Korea's very own Tusan Heavy Industries and Construction, currently the #1 leader in the desalination plant market.
Our company has been building these plants and working on desalination technology for about 40 years now. We built this one to help expand our overseas market and prepare for future water shortages.
The purified water has been certified as safe to drink by the Busan Water Authority, and the cost for consumers will be the same as fresh water from other sources. So is Korea facing a water shortage? Well, not right now, but potentially yes. According to a recent UN report, by the year 2030, nearly half of the global population will face water shortages due to demand exceeding water supply.
The world is headed towards water shortages. Desalination plants are one way to fight water scarcity. And in the past 2 to 3 years, the number of these plants has grown tenfold.
There are currently more than 16,000 desalination plants worldwide, and in the face of water scarcity, that number is expected to increase in the years to come. Connie Lee, Arirang News, Busan.
Now, Korea and Japan are both known around the world for having chronically low birth rates, and encouraging people to tie the knot has long been seen as a logical solution to this very grave problem, as having children outside of wedlock is considered a big cultural no-no in both countries. But for more on how the Koreans and Japanese people think about marriage, here's our Kim Min-ji.
An aging population and low birth rate, two problems that Korea and Japan have in common and are trying to solve. And since having children out of wedlock is considered socially unacceptable in either country, the focus is on encouraging people to get married. So the countries share similar problems, but do the people of Korea and Japan share similar views on marriage? A report by the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs says no. In surveys on over 10,000 single men and women from Japan between the ages of 18 and 49 and 1,500 Koreans in the same age group, more than 80% of Korean men said marriage comes with benefits, while just about 60% of Japanese men agreed. As for women, roughly 7 in 10 from both countries said marriage was beneficial. Their reasons? Koreans were more based on emotion. The #1 reason given was knowing they could rely on their spouse for emotional support. Being allowed to live with their loved one came next on the list. The Japanese respondents, on the other hand, tended to be more practical, with the #1 reason being to have children. This was trailed by emotional support and fulfilling the expectations of their parents and relatives. But, as we all know, marriage comes after dating. But Japanese men seem to be more reluctant about dating than Korean men. Nearly 3/4 of Japanese men who took the survey said they were not in a relationship, in comparison with 66% of Korean men. The report says all this stems from Japan's prolonged economic slump, which has changed their spending patterns, making them focus more on their own life rather than a relationship. However, it warns that Korea is no exception to the situation given its slow economic growth and call for efforts to reduce the burdens on young people that keep them from tying the knot. 김민지, 아리랑 뉴스.
Any good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off in baseball. Now, after Kia Tigers rejected a major league bid for their ace Yang Hyun-jung, reports are coming out that the lefty ace might try for Japan this time. With Yang Hyun-jung still eligible to be posted for Japan's MPB, the 26-year-old recently expressed his desire to continue his pursuit of playing overseas. And while Japanese teams are unlikely to post the big money, it's rumored that the Oryx Buffaloes are keen on possibly signing the lefty pitcher. Oryx has been known to sign Korean players in the past, such as Korea's legend Park Chan-ho, Samsung Lions slugger Lee Seung-yup, and SoftBank Hawks and former Lotte giant Lee Dae-ho. And speaking of the MPB, it seems like the Abenomics is affecting the Korean players currently playing in Japan at the moment, as the yen continues to drop compared to the Korean won. Currently, the two big names playing in Japan are Hanshin Tigers closer Oh Seung-hwan and SoftBank Hawks Lee Dae-ho. And with the yen dropping, Lee Dae-ho's salary, which is 400 million yen, is now valued at 3.6 billion won instead of the initial 4.2 billion won, a difference of roughly 540,000 US dollars. Now, experts say with the yen dropping, more and more Korean players are losing interest in playing in the MPB. Now, back here in the nation, one of the fiercest rivalry in sports is the rivalry between Korea University and Yonsei University. And now the rivalry is on the athletes they are able to recruit, with the two big athletes representing the two universities being Kim Yeon-ah for Korea University and Son Yeon-jae for Yonsei University. The two universities are looking into special admissions for golf stars now. And recently, with Lydia Ko getting into Korea University under a special international student admissions, things are heating up as Yonsei University boasts names like Chang Han-ah and Baek Yu-jung, while Korea University boasts names like Kim Hyo-ju and Chun In-ji. And finishing things off in swimming and the ongoing controversy over the lack of reporting on Soon Young's doping scandal. Now, with the investigation currently taking place, the Australian Swimming Federation has banned the Olympic swimmer from training in the nation. In a report sent in by the Australian government, Soon Young has been banned from swimming in the country where he has been training all this time. In addition, his swimming coach, Dennis Cottrell, is set to cut ties with the Chinese swimmer as well. Now, this comes after Soon Young tested positive on a banned substance and was reported 6 months after the initial positive test. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Another freezing morning we are having. The severe cold snap continues to keep Korean peninsula in its icy grip all day today. Now, low kicked off at -7 this morning in Seoul, and the high will only hike up to -1 later in the day. And it seems like we need to get ready for even colder morning tomorrow with lows plunging to -9 tomorrow morning. But at least it's not snowing up north. People in Jeollado provinces and the surrounding areas have been receiving snowfall for 4 consecutive days now, and even right now it's snowing in there. But elsewhere can expect to have clear skies with a slim chance of snow flurries in the capital areas. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, while the afternoon high in Seoul rises to -1, Daegu and Gwangju peak at 5, and Busan will top out at 7 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju will be getting up to 8, while Daejeon and Dokdo sees highs of 1 and 3. Now, no snow is in store for a while here in Seoul, but mid-winter-like temperatures continue till the early next week, so please stay warm and safe in cold weather. That's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now, at least. We are going to be back at noon Korea time with our next newscast. Until then, goodbye.